The bells of the city carried an old weight, iron on the air. A clangor that seeped through stone walls and silk bed curtains until even dreams acquired a metallic edge. From her balcony within Maegor's holdfast, Margaery watched dusk sink into the alleys and courts of King's Landing. Torches flared to life one by one along the outer curtain wall, a necklace of embers strung between the sea and the black mouth of the gate. Somewhere below, bread was being handed out in baskets stamped with the rose of Highgarden. Somewhere below, a boy in scratched leather struck another boy for trying to cut the line. The guards raised their voices, and order was restored with a sternness that carried no cruelty. A queen's charity was not meant to be a cudgel. It was meant to be a promise. "My lady," said her maid softly from behind her. "Shall I bring the cloak?" In a moment, Margaery let the breeze toy with the edge of her sleeve, then turned back into the chamber where lamplight thinned the shadows. She wore lavender tonight. An undecided color, she thought. Not so bold as amaranth, not so innocent as white. Above the mantel, a carved stag glared out from the stone with empty eyes, gilding long flaked away. The stag looked stubborn even in defeat, as though pride were a kind of afterlife. Her grandmother had taken the chair by the fire without asking, the way a storm took a hillside. Lady Olenna's cane leaned against the armrest, a pointer ready to tap at the world's impudence. "Stop staring at the city as if it's a game board you can solve by will," the old woman said. "You'll give yourself a cramp." "If it were a game board, at least the rules would be written," Margaery replied, smiling. "We would know which way the pieces move." "Oh, we know. The pieces move toward power or away from the headsman, usually both." Margaery sat opposite her. "How are the kitchens?" Harried. "Your notion of making small loaves shaped like roses was foolishness that delighted the small folk and confounded the bakers. They've been at their ovens all day, and they curse you between prayers. That means you've done well?" Olenna tilted her head a fraction. "How many watchmen did we pay this week?" "Enough to remind them that a queen's memory can be minted in coin," Margaery said. "Wages and arrears were made even, plus wine for the night shifts. It is too hot to stand still with no drink to wet the mouth. Vinegar and water, I hope." "Mostly." She paused. "One commander prides himself on not being bought." "Then pay the men to ignore their commander." Margaery laughed. A quick, bright thing. She rose and reached to draw the cloak about her shoulders. She could feel the city through the stone, the way a sailor could sometimes feel the sea in his knees, even on shore. The Red Keep had a heartbeat when it contained enough people and fear. At the door, she paused. "The High Sparrow agreed to meet at dawn. He will bring 2 septons and be rid of them if I ask." Olenna snorted. "He's a man who thinks virtue is a chain. Be careful which links you pick up." "I will be pleasant. Polite goes farther than piety with him. He wishes for a queen to kneel. I will give him a queen who listens. The world may yet survive it." Olenna's bright old eyes softened a hair. "You look tired." "I'm hungry," Margaery admitted. "That's close enough. The scent from those loaves." She trailed off and shook her head. "Any word of Lord Baelish?" "Pater." Olenna's mouth pinched. "He flits. He has the air of a man who guesses what his shadow will say before it speaks. But there is news from the Vale, and that is his seat now for a time." "Gossip only?" Margaery asked. "Gossip is the mother of truth," Jon Royce grumbles. "Maiden's Gate stands strangely quiet, and there is a whisper that a girl with auburn hair keeps her head down in the kitchens at the Gates of the Moon." Margaery stilled. "A girl with auburn hair is a story told in every village from here to White Harbor." Olenna tapped her cane lightly. This story carried a tune only old ears can hear, a Northman's song, unsung long enough to be missed. "Do you think it is her?" "I think Petter liked to play with fires that never burned him. I think he believes himself smoke and ember both. And I think—" The old woman leaned forward. "That to beat a fox in the briars you don't chase. You make the briars love you more than they love him." "I have been making briars love me all day," Margaery said dryly. "Every thorn in the city pricked my hand for a smile. Then bleed prettily. There is no other grace in this climate." Olenna raised a hand. "Go." Speak to your sparrow. Plant bread in the hearts of men. But remember this, the man you want to beat made a queen out of a sister. He will not stop for a rose. I will not stop for a mockingbird." They parted with a kiss that smelled of rose water and iron. At dawn, King's Landing was a pale thing. The sky washed clean as if the night had scoured it. The steps of the Great Sept felt cool beneath her feet. The High Sparrow met her in a low cloister garden where lemon trees potted in old amphorae offered a guest shade. It was broad across the shoulders for a man who wore rags, his hair cropped, his face without ornament. He looked like a stone one might trip over. Nothing more, nothing less. "Your Grace," he said without bending. "You are prompt. The mother loves those who respect bread and time." "I would not keep the mother waiting," Margaery said. She kept her voice light and quiet. She wore no jewels, only a thin gold circlet and a gown simple as a summer field. "I brought herbs from our gardens. High Garden's mint for the sick room and sage for the dying. My maester says the scent of sage eases the blood." "Ah." The High Sparrow took the pouch from her without thanks and peered inside. "Mint for breath is a kindness in a city that stinks. What would you have of me for it?" "A blessing for the ovens," Margaery said. "A prayer whispered over the flour is a better sermon than any shouted from a pulpit. I would have the septas walk among the queues. I would have them sing. And your rose stamped on every loaf. Would you have my face instead?" Margaery asked lightly. "That would sour the dough." He did not respond to the jest. "The faith is not a garnish for a queen's table. The faith is the table," she said. "I would be the cloth that hides the scars." He studied her, his eyes a clear brown that had seen worse than hunger. "You are clever. Cleverness is a cross you may live to regret." He turned. They paced the cloister together. "The boy king is impressionable." "He is a child," Margaery said. "Children believe in mercy until they're taught to distrust it. His mother teaches him a great deal. Her lessons taste of iron and bitter wine." "Her lessons are hers," Margaery said. "I will teach him to read the petitions placed before him, to hold a quill without blotting, to walk among his people with a guard that does not frighten them. If he is to be king, let him learn the weight of looking." The High Sparrow's mouth twitched. "A king is not elected by glances." "No," she said. "But lords forget that small folk outnumber banners. If I cannot make them love him, I mean to make them trust that the bread comes at dawn and the water jars are clean." They paused beneath a lemon, the leaves glossy, the fruit a handful of sunrise. "There is talk," he said after a while. "Immorality among armored men. Braggarts who wore cloaks paid by your father. Women kept for the sport of silver. The faith is not blind, nor is it willing to be your broom. If you have names, give them," Margaery replied. "And if those names belong to men who were bought to stand between me and a mob, and they abuse that coin to buy themselves meat, then purge them. I do not need brutes who wear my colors to shame my house." She met his gaze. "But if you would use whispers to bruise a queen because you fear her youth, be plain. I have no patience for piety that wears other people as masks." "No." A surprisingly amused breath escaped him. "Plain speech, then. Your husband's blood is not true. That rumor has had more lives than a cat." Margaery lifted a lemon leaf and let it fall. "And a queen cannot answer every rumor without amplifying them. The faith investigates. It watches. If a confession were to come before us, a mother's sin, a father's lie, the kingdom would tremble. The boy could be deposed. There are precedents. There are also wars," Margaery said. "If you break the branch, the nest falls. We would have another nest, and another branch, and every egg cracked beneath." "No, Baba, I do not work for your house." "You work for the seven," she said, "and the seven work on those who live. I am trying to keep a city living." Her voice went softer. "If the faith must break a truth, let it do so when there is a place for the pieces to land. I will build that place, if you give me time. You ask for delay. Delay is a kind of sin when it protects wickedness. I ask for sequence, she said gently. First bread, then clean wells, then paid guards, then time enough for men to think instead of burn. Then your truth. Me. The High Sparrow did not nod. He did not offer his hand. You may have my septas in the lines, he said. You may have the hymn. Keep your coin in the alms boxes as promised. And if you lie to me, I will tear down your rose with my own hands. Your hands will find thorns, she said and smiled. They will bleed for the city as mine do. He watched her as if she were a riddle carved into a wall that would only answer after a season. Go then, he said. Manage bread. We will speak again. May. By midday, the lower market shimmered with heat and song, and Margaery's listeners, her gentle cousin Alara and her bold cousin Mega, had counted heads at the ovens and heard whispers while pretending not to. Mega carried her fan like a baton and flicked it when a rumor pleased her. Sir Osney visited a house on the Street of Silk twice last week, Mega reported in a low voice as they walked beneath awnings that sagged under the sun. He wore a green hood, but the whore liked his white teeth and too much heat in his eyes. She told another, and that one told Olivar. Her smile sharpened. It seems the Kettleblacks keep their pots on everyone's stove. Let the faith have the tales of the Kettleblacks, Margaery said. They will do more with them than I could. Alara lifted a basket of lilies from a flower girl and tucked a coin beneath it. A baker's wife said the watch captain's man took 3 loaves for himself and laughed when she asked for coin. I scolded him. He is sorry to live under your eyes. Good, Margaery said. We must be a taste in their mouths too strong to forget. They turned a corner into shade, and a boy darted out, grubby, eyes bright. He had no shoes. He had a knife. The point touched the underside of Margaery's sleeve. He was shaking so hard the blade knocked lightly against her wristbone. Her men moved as one, a ripple of drawn steel, but Margaery had already reached out with her unarmed hand. She enclosed the boy's wrist as gently as if she were taking a kitten by the scruff. Little fox, she said, do not bite a hand that carries bread. He stared at her mouth, as if the words were beads. She eased his knife away and nodded to her guard to relax. The men obeyed. What is your name? Tom. Of course it is. She gave him the knife back. Cut slices for your mother tonight. Come to the upper queue at dawn with her. Tell the septa my name and you will be taken to the front. He waited for a blow that did not come. He started to cry. Fierce, embarrassed tears he hid by turning and running as if pursued by his own breath. Alara exhaled. You frighten me sometimes. I am smaller than Mega, Margaery said. You frighten me more than Mega. Margaery squeezed Alara's hand and let the markets swallow their laughter. Above it all rose the hum of a city caught between fear and hope, the air changing like the second before a storm breaks sideways rather than down. In the afternoon, she received a visitor who always knew the quietest staircases. He entered her solar as if by accident, round and mild-eyed and smelling faintly of scroll dust and spices that had never seen the reach. He bowed so perfectly she could not help but suspect mockery. Lord Varys unrolled himself out of a nod like silk that refused to wrinkle. Your Grace, I do not recall asking for the Master of Whisperers today, Margaery said, and offered him wine. That is why I came. He did not drink. I find if I attend when I am sent for, it is assumed I do not come on other days. Always so contrary, Olenna said from the hearth. She had been quiet for half an hour, seeming to drift with her eyes closed, and at the sound of Varys' voice she opened them and sharpened. What do you bring? If it is a lie, make it interesting. Now, a truth that you may prefer to consider a lie until it becomes useful, Varys said easily. A matter concerning our friend with the pretty bird on a sad shield. Pedir. Dot. Olenna said the name like a splinter. Varys folded his hands. There are ledgers from Gulltown that show customs duties remitted on shipments that never arrived. Coin was funneled through brothels in the Vale and ended up buying favors in King's Landing. There is also a letter in a woman's hand, written long ago, that claims Lannisters killed her husband. The letter was written at the behest of Lord Baelish, who told the lady what to say and promised her a marriage if she obeyed. Olenna leaned forward. You have this letter. I have a copy, Varys said. The original is in a chest in the Eyrie, waiting for a day that never comes, guarded by a man who is more loyal to his masters than to the truth. Then it is smoke, Olenna said. A copy is a whisper of a ghost, useful for scaring children, unless the ghost returns. Varys' smile touched his eyes like lantern light touches water. The kitchen rumor my lady mentioned, about a girl with auburn hair in the Vale, has music to it. Lord Baelish prefers to keep trophies. He is no stranger to keeping wards, and a ward's past is easily buried under a new name. Margaery had not moved. She felt her heartbeat deepen and slow, as if she were slipping into a current that required quiet or drownings. If what you imply is true, she said softly, he has leverage over the North that he will spend when it suits him. Leverage, Varys murmured, is such a cold word for a warm-blooded child. Do not preach at me, Margaery said. If the Stark girl is alive, she has been used more than once by people who thought they were making the world better. I will not add my hand to that if I can avoid it. I want her safe for her own sake. For the realm too, yes, but not only. If you know a path to safety, give it. And Varys watched her over the rim of the cup he did not drink from. The path is narrow. It goes through the Vale, and the Vale's gatekeeper is vain. He believes himself unassailable in his high nest. A summons might flatter him into flight. A promise might make him lower his head. A snare might then be lowered. Nay, you will snare him with me? I do not snare, Varys said. I arrange for other men to meet the rope they've been measuring around their neighbors' necks. But the rope must be strong, Your Grace. You require more than whispers and guesses. You require sworn testimony from a witness who can name names in a hall where other names can act. Jon Royce, Olenna said at once. Or Nestor, or both. The old stones in that country talk to those two. They both hate Pettir's perfume. Lord Jon would be excellent, Varys agreed. An honest man as sharp as a knife if you let him cut where he is used to carving. I can send a raven that will make him travel. He respects oaths. He will not come for you. He will come for a chance to defend the Vale from a man he already senses is wrong. And the girl? Margaery asked. A separate letter, to a woman who loves psalms and has long stopped singing them aloud, Varys said, voice softening as if even he felt the weight of too many candles snuffed before their time. If the girl is where I think, she is in the keeping of a man who tells stories about rescue and writes scripts where he is always savior. If he sees a stage brighter than the one he's on, he will step toward it. Pater, Olenna said, is an actor who believes that no one else reads the playhouse bills. Margaery let the decision ripen for one slow breath. Then, send your ravens. Make them plain. Use no flattery beyond what truth allows. Invite Lord Baelish to court under pretense of securing the Vale's grain stores for the winter, and praise his prudence to bring him speed. Invite Lord Jon to speak as to the Val's needs. Nay. And the girl? Varys pressed. Margaery's hands tightened on the arms of her chair until the polished wood woke under her fingers. Invite the girl to visit her friend, she said. If she is my friend, if she remembers me, if she wishes to come, make no promise for me that I would not give her myself if she stood here. I will not put words in your mouth, Varys said. Nor hers. Good. Margaery rose. We will host a council in the Dragon Pit. Not a small council. A great one. She felt the idea take root even as she said it, sending threads down through fear into possibilities. Not to decide a throne, she added when Olenna's eyebrows lifted, but to determine how the city will eat and who will keep its gates. A meeting disguised as mercy compromises a dozen swords. Do not announce too soon, Olenna warned. It will grow too many ears. Margaery nodded. We will shape the rumor so that it reaches the right throats, and we will prepare the captain of the city watch to be deaf in one ear and hearing in the other. Olenna chuckled. I begin to see your garden. By evening, ravens lifted from the Red Keep like a handful of dark seeds. That night, Margaery stopped before Tommen's door and stood until her breath slowed. And when she entered, she left the mantle of calculation at the threshold. The boy sat at a table with wooden knights, their paint chipped, their lances sturdy. The candles guttered. He had not noticed. A boy king trying to feed his miniature army with the crumbs of a tart. Sir Loras stood behind him, watchful as a hound, pain tucked behind a smile. Margaery met her brother's gaze, a heartbeat, and saw what he hid. His arm still trembled sometimes from a wound he pretended was healed. Tommen, she said, come walk. They walked in a corridor of pale stone lit by rushes that had too much smoke in them. Tommen told her about a cat he had fed beneath the kitchens and how the cat was missing a tail and had adopted him. He talked about cats a great deal. Margaery kept every cat safe in her heart until she could build a kingdom of cats for him to rule. Sometimes that was what power was. The promise that the fragile things who loved you would be alive tomorrow. You are too good to me, Tommen said suddenly, shy. I am exactly good enough, she said and ruffled his hair. You are the best student in the city. That cannot be true, he murmured. It is true tonight, she said. Tomorrow it will be his turn, and nodded at a scullion lad who gaped at them as at a pageant. The boy dropped his bucket and it splashed their shoes, and Tommen laughed and did not scold. That laughter, air in the corridor, made Margaery want to weep. When she returned to her chamber, she found a letter sealed with drab brown wax, and no crest. Varys' ravens flew with gold-tipped feathers. This looked like a message brought under a cloak. She broke it. 3 lines and a name signed as small as a sigh. We come for bread and truth. The veil is not a purse on a string. I will speak. Jon Royce. It had begun. News traveled like water. In the space of 3 days, the markets shifted. The alley tongues sharpened, and the Red Keep acquired a peculiar stillness that only the old and the fearful recognized as a prelude. Cersei visited, all green eyes and a smile sharp enough to cut wet paper. She dismissed Margaery's attendance with a flip of her fingers. Her dress shone like a snake in sunlight. Qyburn puddled behind her, as unremarkable as a shadow. His hands folded inside sleeves that smelled faintly of herbs and something more metallic. My father used to hold these corridors in his teeth, Cersei said by way of greeting. Now they loosen. Your father's teeth were very strong, Margaery said. But even strong teeth require brushing. Cersei's lips curved. I thought you would be at the sept, kneeling. I knelt at dawn, Margaery said. I kneel very well. It keeps my knees from getting stiff. Clever girls always crack. They bend too often. Mothers who mock kneeling forget what it took to become a mother, Margaery said sweetly, and enjoyed the flash in Cersei's eyes. How may I serve you, your grace? You may stop your theater, Cersei said. Bread is not power. It is, Margaery said, exactly power. For peasants. Peasants feed armies, Margaery said. I intend to let them continue to do so. Cersei's smile went away. I hear you invite vassals not your own to a meeting in my city, she said. I hear gossip. My ears are everywhere. Your ears are very tired, Margaery said. You use them to listen for praise so long they can't hear problems. Cersei's hand twitched. You forget yourself. You are my son's wife, not my sovereign. I am your son's wife, Margaery agreed, and his people's queen. Queen, Cersei repeated, the word tasting like a coin she was not permitted to spend. Do you know what it is to wear a crown? It is to become the nail every hammer seeks. No, Kadesha. It is to become the hand that guides the hammer's swing, Margaery said. I recommend it. Cersei's eyes slid past her shoulder to where Mega had stopped breathing. "I recommend," Cersei said softly, "that you watch the men you pay. They carry tales. Some of those tales are of your kindness, some are of your appetites. That is a graceless way to warn me about the Kettleblacks," Margaery said. "If you wish to accuse. Cersei's laughter soured the air. "Accuse? I only observe. Some men speak of a queen who likes to be admired. Some men claim they have been allowed to admire more than is decent. Me. I'm there." "They lie," Margaery said, not rising to the bait, and it was true. The men Cersei spoke of had walked the same corridors as Margaery. Some had stared too long, and those had been dismissed. None had been permitted inside the boundary where Margaery's body ended and hers alone began. But truth mattered less than the shape of accusation. "They will confess if asked to by the faith," Cersei said with breath that smelled faintly of arbor red. "Men will confess anything if a rope is near. The seven reward confession. No, the seven punish those who contrive it," Margaery said. "But if the faith wishes to question my retainers, I welcome it. I have nothing to hide." She stepped closer. "Do you?" Cersei's mouth pressed flat. "You think you can make me the villain?" she whispered. "I carry this realm on my back." "You could have carried it with me," Margaery said. "But you prefer to drag it by the hair." Their gazes met with an intimacy that had nothing to do with love. For a heartbeat, Margaery let Cersei see the cold place inside her that had nothing to do with roses, the place where arithmetic formed with perfect clarity. This move, that counter-move, this cost, that saving. She saw Cersei recognize it, and for the first time the Lannister queen looked a little frightened. When Cersei left, Qyburn remained behind as if he had lost his shadow. He smiled awkwardly. "Your Grace," he said, "there are matters of health." "I do not need your poultices," Margaery said, then softened. "But I may require your memory." She moved to the table and took up a small felt purse. "There is coin here for your workshop's legal purchases only. In return, I want every tale you have heard about the Kettleblacks collected and written out plainly with names and places. I also want the names of boys sent to work in the Red Keep's lower passages these last 2 years. Not rumor. Names written in legend." Qyburn blinked twice, startled by her bluntness. Then something not quite servility slid into place behind his eyes. He could serve more than one woman if coin and curiosity were both pleased. "The boys are the spiders," he said. "Or were. Your loyalty is your own," Margaery said. "Mine is to the safety of this keep. If there is a place in your heart where science sits beyond loyalty, set it aside for today." He bowed, a small crack in his stiff shoulders. "As you command." At week's end, the Vale entered the city. They came with mail clean as new pewter and crests that had not grown greedy with blood. Bronze and sky blue, eagles and runes. Jon Royce rode at their head like a man whose mount knew the weight of his body better than his thinking ever could, the sort of rider whose horse obeyed because he wanted to, not because he had been taught to. He was heavy in the way of men who had not stopped being boys, only learned how to carry it. He dismounted in the courtyard, looked up at the Red Keep as a mason looks at a wall, and snorted. Margaery went to greet him at the doors of the throne room. She wore white that day, plain as the inside of a new loaf, with a belt of green leaves at her waist. Jon took her measure with a swift, frank glance that probably did not change for queens. He bowed. "My lady, Lord Royce, welcome." She smiled. "I have heard that the bronze of runestone never stains the hands holding it. The man holding it stains the bronze," he said. "You are young." "So are you," she said, with a hint of mischief that melted a very small portion of his gruffness. "Please." But he followed her inside. The hall murmured. Reached lords made quiet way to offer clasped hands. The High Sparrow was present with 2 septons who looked as though they disapproved of ceilings. Cersei watched from a balcony, hidden enough to pretend she did not watch. Mega stood with Margaery's other cousins like a cluster of lilies placed to make a room smell honest. The city watch ring the pillars, their new wages making their stance attentive without being brittle. Petyr Baelish arrived an hour later, just when patience had begun to fray. He came in embroidered gray, a mockingbird so well stitched at his throat it seemed about to fly. He brought the Vale's household guard that bore his new banner, quartered mockingbird and moon. Margaery thought it tasteless and exactly right. He bowed lower than Jan Royce had bowed, and smiled deeper. "Your Grace," he purred. "King's Landing improves under your touch." "Lord Protector," Margaery said. "Your presence honors us. Your presence parfumes us," he said in a lower voice as he drew nearer. "There is a sweetness to you that refuses to be covered by smoke. And there is a smoke to you that refuses to dissipate," she returned. "Let us see if we can both learn to breathe." Oddly, he laughed, and meant it. He was happiest when playing. "I hear you would hold a council. Shall I fetch chairs?" "No, yeah. There will be chairs for everyone," she said. "Even those who prefer to sit on other men's laps." They sat. Margaery did not take the Iron Throne. She stood in the body of the hall on a simple dais, a queen without a sword. Tommen sat at the far end on a lower seat carved with lions that looked older than they were. He swung his feet, stilled them when Loras touched his shoulder, tried to look like something other than a child. Margaery lifted her hand, and the hum subsided. "Lords of the Reach and the Vale and the Crownlands," she said. "We meet not to decide succession. We meet to decide bread. Winter reaches for us. The roads bear more refugees than carts of grain. The watch is loyal and needs paying. The baker's ovens need fuel. The harbor lacks pilings. All this we know. What we cannot yet measure is what you are willing to give to make the city hold through frost." She let this hang. Men disliked being made to agree to something that sounded like virtue. Make virtue into a project, she thought, and they will agree to it with the pride they reserve for tool sheds. Jan Royce stepped forward without waiting to be called, the privilege of honest age. "The Vale has stores," he said. "We can spare some, carried down the high road before it ices, but we will not empty the Eyrie to fill this pit. The Lord Protector says otherwise." He did not look at Petyr when he said it, which was as good as striking him in the mouth. Margaery nodded. "We do not ask for empty barns. We ask for patience and price. Bring your grain at a fair price delivered in safety, and the crown will pay for guards to ride with the wagons and make sure the gold returns to the Vale." City gold buys city knives," someone muttered from the shadows. "There's no difference between a price and a theft when the watch stands in the road." "You speak as if you have been robbed by the watch," Margaery said, turning toward the voice. "If you have, tell me when and where and who did it. They'll be punished. If you're only telling a story to cheer your own black heart, hush." "Then me." A murmur of approval lapped the hall like a small wave finding a better shore. "And who speaks for the Vale's interests?" Petyr asked warmly. "Am I to list myself?" "You are here to listen," Margaery said. "Lord Jan speaks for the Vale. My Lady Queen, the law." "The law is not a coin you can stamp with your face," Jan said, his deep voice cutting. "I am sick to death of perfumed law. The laws of boy queens and girl queens matter less than the law of wheat." "Nani, empty. Bah. That is our first business then," Margaery said smoothly into the open seam. We will form a grain council composed of 3 men, one from the Vale, one from the Reach, and one from the Crownlands. They will be named now. Lord Jan Royce's steward, Lord Hightower's steward, and the keeper of the city granaries. They will set prices and routes. They will be paid out of petty cash, not supped by courtiers. "Very sweet," Petyr murmured to her under his breath, drifting closer. "But petty cash will not fix your other problem." "And what problem is that?" she asked, eyes forward. "People who don't accept bread as a substitute for blood." She turned her head very slightly. "Which people do you name, my lord? Give me a list. I send men out every night and I love a good list." He smiled without showing his teeth. "You can't list hunger. Watch me." she said. When the grain prices were decided, when the city watch had been accused and defended, and then presented with a schedule of pay that promised no more excuses, when the High Sparrow had spoken not one word against the plan, but 3 against human weakness, Margaery let the council stretch, as if it had been born to slow lit. It was a calculation she wore like a necklace. The more the men felt they had just done honest work, the more drunk they would be on their own virtue, and the readier their minds to absorb one more matter while the night's meals cool. She lifted her hand a second time. There is a final item. The hall sobered. Men in halls know when a woman's last thing will not be small. It is a matter of murder and law, Margaery said. It is a matter of who writes letters and who pays for letters to be written. It concerns the Vale. She did not look at Baelish. That would be to let him dance. He danced best when watched. Years ago, a letter was sent from the Eyrie claiming that Lannisters had murdered Lord Arryn. That letter was believed. It led to a war. That war ate your sons. It is now asserted that the letter was written at the urging of a man who did not mind blood in other men's mouths if it salted his bread. Mayan Denvian. A murmur like a hive lifting filled the hall. Jan Royce's jaw worked. His eyes did not move from the space in front of him, as if he were parsing a runic inscription that had waited for him for 3 winters. The letter was written by Lysa Arryn, Margaery said, but the words were chosen by Lord Petyr Baelish. Petyr's smile did not falter. He bowed very slightly. Your Grace is misinformed. Witnesses, Margaery said calmly. Please approach. Varys had done more than send ravens. He ushered forward a scribe from Gulltown whose ears stuck out like handles. The scribe trembled and then calmed when Lord Jan's hand, heavy and warm, steadied his shoulder. He testified. Customs, ships that did not dock, coin that vanished and reappeared in accounts that belonged to brothels favored by men in fine cloaks from King's Landing. He spoke a name and lowered his eyes. Oliver. This one, a steward from Littlefinger's establishments, delivered his own tale with a grace that made Margaery unsure how much of it was performance. He named kettleblacks he had paid at Lord Baelish's command, to spy, to lie. He let tears gather when he spoke of a girl with auburn hair passing through a back door one winter dawn, a girl who was no whore and whose face he had been told to forget. It was not enough. Confessions given held up by fear were threadbare on their own. Margaery had known this before the first man spoke. The hall's murmur turned. Men love scandal until it picks up a sword. She lifted her hand a 3rd time. No smile now, no warming, and said, Sansa Stark, step forward. She was there. For a moment, Margaery felt all the air leave her throat, and then return with a small sound. The girl had not been a girl for some time. Nothing in this city allowed girls to stay girls. Sansa stepped from behind a pillar where she had waited with Mega, hidden by the angle of stone and the arrogance of men who never looked down when they could look at each other. Her hair shone auburn. Her face looked older than Margaery remembered and in places younger. There were lines of hunger along her mouth that became strength when she moved. She did not curtsy. She did not look at Petyr. She walked to the center and turned so that her voice would carry. I was Lord Eddard Stark's daughter, she said, not loudly. But a clarity moved through her words like a blade through snow. I am Lady Eddard's daughter still, for my mother taught me to stand up under weight. Lord Baelish saved my life from a city that would have killed me after it killed my father. Then he took me to the Vale and said he would save me again. He did not. He took me to a woman whose fear was used like a rope around her throat. He used me to secure his place. He told Lysa Arryn what to write in the letter to my mother to set the North and South against one another. He told me to smile the way a puppet smiles when a string is pulled. He promised to keep me safe and kissed me without my leave. He pushed Lysa Arryn through a moon door when she accused him. Then he told me to say I had done the murder if asked, and told the Lord of Runestone that I was his bastard. I am not. I am Sansa of Winterfell, and I want to go home. Me, dia. Silence grew from the floor. Petyr finally smiled without humor. A touching story, but brought forward now. How convenient. A little bird taught to sing at last. The song is not new. Nor is the crime, Margaery said. Lord Jon. Roy stepped forward. He had his own ledger, not of coin, but of observation. He spoke of the ways Petter had spent when he had acquired the title of Lord Protector, how he had dismissed old servants and sweetened the fees of new ones, how a letter had been misdelivered to his own house by a boy who had confused two seals, and how, reading it, he had seen Petter's hand in an order that commanded silence where none should be. He spoke of Elaine Stone, who kept her hair near the fire as if she wanted to burn it, and of the morning he had seen the girl's face when Petter had touched her shoulder, as though to steady her, and she had flinched the way beaten dogs flinch from a raised spoon. Men shift when a good man speaks. Women do not. Women know when a good man tells the truth because the truth was a woman's entire property before the first lie was invented. Margaery liked Jon Royce then the way she had liked a certain teacher in Highgarden's sunlit rooms. Someone too honest to play and too practical to pray for change, rather than enact it. Petter's hand touched the mockingbird at his throat. "Since when?" he asked in a voice that felt like the end of summer. "Do we hang men because a frightened girl tells stories? Since when do we call a letter with no seal of law a basis for judgment? My queen, you know better than to let the vault of the Red Keep be filled with tears. I have fed your city as often as any man here." "Me? Oh. You fed your purse," Jon said. "And if I did," Petter returned. "What then? The city is fed. The king's needs are met. Did I not steer silver into your granaries, your grace? Did I not advise your lord father? Ah, no, forgive me. That was another's father? Did I not keep this throne upright while every man who sat it slid?" Margaery stepped into the space between his words and the hall's rising noise. "You are not charged today with being clever," she said. "Pity," he said very softly. "It is what I am best at. You are charged with murder, manipulation of the crown's finances, and abuse of a gentlewoman under your protection," Margaery continued. "You will be held in the Red Keep under guard until trial." He tilted his head. "Trial by whom?" "By those who remember when the word still meant something," Margaery said. "By the faith?" Petter suggested lazily. "I will produce confessions in half an hour. That is their business." "By the small lords of the Crownlands, the Vale, and the Reach," she said. "Men who would have to answer to their neighbors if they tried to use the verdict to line their pockets." He looked at her for a long time, and the hall fell away. For an instant they were two minds on a knife edge. She saw him almost see her. She saw him understand that he had not been paying attention to the moment he should have begun paying attention to her. Then he moved. It was a small movement, a hand flick. But the man near him, one of his household guard, tensed and braced as though for a fight. That was all the watch needed. The captain had been primed. His men moved with the staccato precision of soldiers who had been promised wages today, tomorrow, and next week. Two had crossbows lifted before the mockingbird could finish a breath. Not aimed at his head, aimed at his hands. "Don't," Margaery said, and the guard stilled. "Lord Baelish, if you run tonight you will be hunted." "I have never run," he said. "You've always run," she replied. "You call it dancing because you like music." He smiled despite himself. "I do not love you, your grace," he said, suddenly curiously calm, as if truth had caught him at last and he wished to look at it. "But I admire you in this moment." "You would have loved me," she said. "I only love what I can break," he said. "And you, perhaps, maybe, no." He bowed. "I surrender." He surrendered, and yet there are surgeries even surrender cannot prevent. When a realm inserts a needle into rot, pus comes regardless. Petter went to a room with bars, where sea air did not come, and was brought bread and watered wine. He ate both with polite appetite. 2 nights later, a guard that Margaery had not chosen, in a corridor Margaery's cousins had not yet mapped, took a purse to leave a door unlocked. He was caught not because he was careless, but because Tom the boy with the knife was playing with a cat at the corner of the corridor and saw something that boy and cat both disliked. He ran with the news to a queen who had told him to use her name at dawn. Dawn answered at midnight. She took the corridor with 4 men who owed her wages in life and 2 women who owed her nothing but came anyway. The door had been left wide. Pettier was standing with his hand on the latch, caught between rooms like a story caught between lies. "Your Grace," he said, and bowed as if she had come to call him to supper. "Do not flatter me," she said. "It wastes the air we will need." He looked past her at Tom, the boy hovering in the shadow. "You get children to guard your crown? They guard their own bread," she said. "I teach them names." He sighed. "This city used to be better at pretending." "No," Margaery said. "It was better at pretending no one saw." He returned to his cell of his own feet. In the morning, Margaery had the guard flogged lightly and dismissed publicly and anonymously paid to get him out of the city before he tried to sell his shame. She sent the boy to the head of the queue as promised. She visited Pettier once and found him humming. "Have I lost?" he asked the bars conversationally. "You have been caught," she said. "Loss will be measured later. Loss is the only coin I count." His eyes shifted to where Margaery's gown lay against the stone like a white cloud mistaken for something solid. "You will need more than a mockingbird in a cage. You will need an answer for those who ask why the boy on the small chair sits while you stand on the floor and rule." "Not know me. And Don Cole. Then I will give them an answer," she said. "They have been starving for one." "Which?" he asked idly. "The boy will abdicate? The faith will strip him? I will reveal something that makes your path plain. Be careful. When the stage is too bright, the audience looks for shadows." She did not supply his next line. She left him and went to the sept again. The High Sparrow stood surrounded by women who had washed until their knuckles bled because virtue seemed like the only clean thing in the city. He turned and found her not surprising. "You will ask me to crown you," he said. It was not a question. "Not yet," Margaery said. "I will ask you to help a boy choose the life he wants. He is not old enough to choose. He is old enough to know when his chest hurts," she said. "He tries to breathe and cannot. He is afraid to dive in a sea of blood. He wants a quiet life with cats and books." She lifted her chin. "If he asks to be free, will you free him in the eyes of the faith?" "The faith does not dispose of kings," the High Sparrow said. "Then this one will dispose of himself," she said. "But you will be needed to hold the bowl." The High Sparrow studied her with that odd look of his that could make a man feel 6 years old again and about to be scolded. "You bind me to you when you do me favors I've not asked for." "I bind you to the city," she said. "It will bless us both." Tommen wept when she told him he did not have to be a king forever. He put his head against her shoulder and smelled like throwing sticks and clean paper. Loras stood again at his back, and this time did not pretend he felt nothing. Margaery spoke quietly into hair that had been combed for a crown and not for itself. "You may choose," she said. "There is a place where young men go to learn how to pray, or you may stay and be a king. If you stay, I will be your hands for a time, but you must learn to be my mind. If you go, I will be the city's hands." "What would you have me do?" he asked, small. "What would make you least afraid to sleep?" she asked. "Cats," he whispered. "Forgive me." "There is nothing to forgive," she said. Cersei denied it. She forbade it. She called Margaery witch and snake, and every name men had invented for women who taught other women and boys to say no. But the faith had been invited into the lines at dawn, and the small folk had learned the names of the women who brought them bread, and the city watch had been paid. And the High Sparrow had smelled real tears, and real fear, and real courage, in a boy whose life had been used as a pageant. Cersei's rage was mighty. It was also late. Varys arranged to have a small door of the sept open at dawn, and Tommen went through it with Loras in plain brown, and his crown stayed behind like a toy in the nursery. The Great Council sat at last in the Dragon Pit, not because it was the place for kings, but because it was the only room big enough to hold the loudness of men with less echo. The old bones of dragons overhead remembered nothing of law, but they made men feel small and therefore temporarily wise. Lords from the Vale and the Reach, the Crownlands, Dorns and Voys, the Stormlands few left unswallowed by quarrel, riverlords who would not sit near frays, and so build spaces with their bodies. No Lannister banners hung. Kevin sent word that he would not bless a council called without his advice, and Margaery sent back that his advice was required and his presence desired, but the council would sit with or without him. He did not come. Margaery wore neither white nor lavender. She wore green, the color of living things that knew how to survive frost. She did not carry a sword. She walked to the center of the pit and looked up until the bones of the last dragons became a net under heaven. The sky beyond was winter blue, but the sun was stubborn. She lifted a hand, and the hand held bravery without showing it. "Tommen has taken vows," she said, and no one gasped because half the room had known and the other half had guessed. "He will live and study and feed cats, and do more good in the end than he could have done with a scepter. The faith has witnessed this. The boy is content." "What of the law?" a thin man from Duskendale cried. "Abdication should be recorded in 7 books, with 7 seals." "We will make the books," Margaery said. "We will create the seals. But today, we must make a kingdom." "Stannis Baratheon is the rightful heir," someone shouted. "He is," Margaery said, "by strict reading. He is also far and engaged upon his own war. If he comes, we will speak to him. If he does not, we must live." "Daenerys Targaryen," another cried. "Dragon Queen. If she comes, we will arrange chairs," Margaery said. "If the dragons come, we will build shelters that the poor can run to with their children. In the meantime, bread day. Now." The word bread calmed them because it was the only word that could. She went on. "The Iron Throne is a seat that has been sat upon by too many men who wanted to be swords. Let it be sat upon by a woman who will be a chair. I propose," she said, and the word tasted less like presumption than she had feared, "that I serve as the realm's protector in this winter under a title agreed here, by acclamation. Queen, if you will have it. Regent, if that salves itch your ears. Let the faith bless it and the small folk see it. Let the Vale, the Reach, the Stormlands, Dorne, the Riverlands, the Crownlands, and when they can bear it, the North send oaths that we will hold this city together. When others come with better claims, we will meet them with bread and argument instead of pyres. Nay, dine, goin, ma. You ask for a crown without a lineage," snarled a man with a Frey's miserable face. "I ask for a crown with a purpose," she said. "I am not the best sword. I'm not the best general. I'm the best baker this city has." Laughter broke like thawed ice. Strange, involuntary, cleansing. Jon Royce raised his hand. "Knives can be bought," he said. "Bread not so easily. The Vale will support a protector queen until such time a better claim arrives at the city's gates without fire. If Lord Baelish is hanged." "Lord Baelish will be judged," Margaery said. "And if the judgment is hanging," Jon pressed. "Then he will hang," she said. "Hell wriggle," someone observed, and an unkind ripple moved through the pit. "I can stand by a rope," she said, "and not blink." The High Sparrow rose then. He did not bless. He simply said, "The faith will witness and bind. If she breaks, we will break her." "Nay, madame." "That makes 2 of us," Olenna muttered, and Margaery had to look down to keep from smiling. The vote, for once, did not take a day. Men liked the idea of a winter queen who promised to relinquish if spring brought dragons and banners they could believe in without having to change their favorite words. The title they agreed upon was an old one with new embroidery, Queen of the Andals, and the first men by acclamation of the Great Council, protector of the realm in the absence of a clear heir. It would look strange on parchment and comfortable on bread stamps. The High Sparrow placed a simple circlet on Margaery's head that had been hammered out of coins and nails and a few melted ornaments given by women who could not afford to give anything else. The small folk that packed the road to the dragon pit lifted their rough hands not to grab but to see. They wanted to see a woman crowned like this because their daughters could not imagine it, and their wives could, secretly. That afternoon, the court sat judgment upon Petyr Baelish. He stood as he had always stood, clean, composed, with a hint of amusement at anyone who took public posture so seriously. The charges were read. Bolívar spoke again. The scribe spoke again. Jan Royce spoke again. Sansa did not speak. She sat beside Margaery with her hands folded tight over one another as if to keep them in the room. When asked her name, she said it as if the vowels mattered to the rest of her life. When asked if she would have Lord Baelish spared, she said, "I would have him stopped." Petyr chose trial by combat because of course he did. He had always preferred other men's swords. But the law allowed it only if a champion could be named from among those in good standing with both the crown and the faith, and the list of men who still qualified was shorter than Petyr expected. Names were suggested. Faces stiffened. Loras was still not fully recovered. He could fight, but he could also die. Margaery did not intend for her city's love to end on one man's bleeding. She had the law of the Crownlands on her side. She invoked it. "Lord Baelish," she said, "the men you would call to your defense will not defend you. The law permits the crown to refuse trial by combat when the accused's crimes are against the peace of the realm. You have made war by whisper. You have made profit of grief. You will be judged as a thief is judged when he steals a loaf during a famine, not with pity, but with proportion." "Nay, Pentea, proportion," he echoed. "A pretty word. Your tongue knows how to place them," she said. "It has never known how to taste them. The panel of lords did not break the way coin breaks. They hardened. The verdict was death by hanging. It was not the sort of death that would please singers. No flames, no heads leaping from bodies, no duels won by a flicker of wrists. It was the sort of death the city understood, a life lifted until it forgot itself." Jan Royce asked to tie the knot. The High Sparrow read from a book that had no pictures. Margaery stood and watched. Petyr met her eyes before the sack went over his face. He smiled, and there was pity in it, as if he would have taught her something if he had had another minute. "Do you regret?" he whispered, not loudly, but in her ear. "I regret that you did not choose another ending," she said. "It does not suit you," he murmured. "To be so plain." "There are times," she said, "when plain is the only dress that will do." And then the rope took him and he did not wriggle long. A city does not change in a day because a rope creaks. It changes in the number of petitions answered, and the number of breasts filled with breath before sleep, and the way bribes become tax when they are written. Margaery learned the names of the harbor's rotting pilings and the mills along the rush. She learned which streets turned to rivers in rain and which bakers' ovens drew flies. She learned the faces of petitioners and the particular way a liar licked his lips when he reached for memory and grabbed story instead. She met with the Iron Bank's pale men and showed them numbers that had been groomed out of ledgers like thorns cut off a rose stem until it looked like a stick. She asked them for coin at terms that made them blink. She got it. She told them that if she defaulted, they could own every second window shutter in King's Landing, and it made them smile with something like love. She wrote to Dorne and spoke to Doran's envoys softly about justice for the murder of a sister, and the memory of a prince who had burned bright and too brief. She sent gold and cloth to Sunspear that matched the Martell's colors so precisely it could only be read as respect. She promised a place at the table when dragons called. She promised a place now, in the Grain Council, so that Dorne could send its dates and its cleverness north. She wrote to White Harbor under a seal of a rose, rather than the crown, and asked after the health of an old man whose appetite for mutton had become a legend. She did not ask for oaths. She asked how the river ran, and if the harbor had silted. She found Sansa in the mornings, in the gardens, where the girl would watch the bees moving like coins, made living. They spoke around the wound. It took time. It took Margaery's promise that she would not use Sansa as a token. It took Sansa's promise that she would tell Margaery when she had had enough mercy for a day and needed anger instead. It took the sending north of a rider with a letter written by Sansa's hand to a place called the Wall, and a man called Snow. Later it took the return of a letter that said only, "I am alive and I am watching, and the night is long, and we have candles again." Loras healed in fits. He trained when he should have slept. He softened when Margaery scolded him. He grew quiet. Once, he climbed the steps to the sept with her and set his hand on a statue's foot, as if to ask a question the god did not know the answer to. She watched him and thought, as she often did, that the Tyrell children were 3 threads pulled from the same spool and someone had tugged them too hard. The Lannister colors faded from court, then bled. Kevin stayed away and sent letters folded so sharply they could cut. Cersei withdrew and plotted. She tried to use the faith to undo what she could not undo with men and gold. The High Sparrow refused to be her whip. He had once been courted by her as a tool. He had then been courted by Margaery as a partner. He had learned to enjoy neither and to govern in his way while understanding the limits of rope and prayer. When Cersei finally accused Margaery publicly of sins that had more to do with Cersei's mirror than the Queen's bed, the Sept listened and then sent her away with quiet contempt. And when rumors about her children became fact, because truth arrived holding a boy's name worry and a boy's cat in the same palm as the crown, Cersei's rage turned inward and ate the delicate parts. She broke. She did not explode. She bent and could not stop bending. Winter sent a mercy of a long autumn. The city laid in stores. The Grain Council did its work and received threats and invitations to dinner and a marriage proposal once that Margaery accepted for her steward, because marriages had always been the kingdom's first wall. When the first snows fell on the Blackwater Rush, the city looked almost pretty. Margaery went to stand on the quay in a cloak that made the night smell green, and watched frost gather and fail along the ropes. She smelled wood smoke. She could almost smell home, High Garden's damp earth and blooming. She had brought a corner of it here. Her cousins kept a pavilion of herbs on a warm terrace and jars of summer under the beds. Children ran underfoot in the outer court without being kicked. Of course, the Seedy did not forget to send other things ashore. Ships carried letters written in different inflections of fate. A rumor came with the smell of oranges that a young man calling himself Aegon had taken a city for himself, not far along the coast, and courted sellswords with a tale of dragons and rightful chairs. A bird from the east came smoking with the message that a woman with silver hair had learned to ride fire. Margaery listened with her head tilted like a lark. If dragons came, they would cast long shadows. She did not intend to be eclipsed. She intended to become shade. "Will you marry a dragon?" Olenna asked one afternoon, as if discussing spices. "I will marry the air if it keeps people fed," Margaery said. "But perhaps I will not have to. Perhaps I will make a peace that does not end in one house swallowing another, and we will step into a shape that is not a feud." "Nani? You sound like your ancestors who built green out of stone," Olenna said. "They were called naive, and they were not. They were stubborn." "Stubbornness is a kind of harvest," Margaery said. "Stubbornness breaks teeth," Olenna replied, but she was smiling. "You did well with the bank. You will do well with the dragons. You will do well with the men who think they are dragons." "What if I do badly?" Margaery asked. Olenna lifted one eyebrow. "Then we will eat our preserves and retreat to the Mander and grow something else." At night, when the keep's hum lowered, when Varys' spiders returned to their corners and Qyburn's charges stopped whispering to the jars that contained no souls, Margaery lay awake and mapped. She saw the north as blank as a slate and wrote Sansa's name on it. She saw the riverlands like a handful of broken mirrors and marked which edges would cut until they could be blunted. She saw Dorne's hot patience. She saw the Vale's cold pride. She saw the Stormlands like a dog with too many owners. She did not see a single throne. She saw chairs placed facing one another, tables built, walls kept low enough to talk over. On an evening when the hearth burned high against a new wind, Sansa came with a letter in her hand, and a look that said she had crossed a small river and meant to cross a mountain next. "He's dead," she said without preamble, and held out the parchment. It was from the wall again. It said little, it said enough. Jon Snow had been stabbed and had survived, and from the words between the words, Margaery saw that survival had changed him. The letter invited Sansa to return north under guard that would meet her in White Harbor if she wanted. It did not ask. It offered. Margaery read it twice. She handed it back. "Do you want to go?" "Yes," Sansa said. "And no, you need me. I need you alive, and in a place where the air does not try to kill you." Margaery smiled faintly. "My place is very damp at the moment with men's talk. Your place is very sharp and very long, like a piece of glass laid from one end of the sky to the other." She reached out. "I will put my hand on glass for you when I can. I will send men with you if you ask. I will give you gold. I will give you a letter that says you travel under my protection. If the North throws it away, throw away the letter. Keep the gold." Didn't I? Sansa's eyes filled and did not spill. "I am grateful," she said. "The word is too small." "It is the right size," Margaery said. "Do not make gratitude into a chain. Use it like a ring, worn, pretty, discarded when it pinches." They embraced and spoke of everything except leaving until it was time to speak only of leaving. When Sansa rode out with 10 good men who had eaten well for a month, the city felt a little smaller to Margaery's feet, but her lungs filled easier. She stood on the gate and watched until the banners were only thoughts. Varys came quietly to stand beside her. They looked like two people watching a private prayer be answered in public. "You have done a good thing," Varys said. "I have done an obvious thing," Margaery said. "Too few people do obvious things. They do what is necessary," he said. "They do what pleases their pride," she said. "Pride is a hunger that doesn't fill." He did not answer. He had never been a man who wasted words when they could be spent later with interest. "What do you want me to say of the dragon rumors?" he asked at last. "Say we are preparing for guests who might bring their own kitchen," she said. "Say we are laying in spices that won't offend. Say that the queen by acclamation is not afraid to be a queen by invitation if it keeps heads on necks." "You are very good at this," Varys murmured. "I had tutors," she said without smiling. "One of them hung. When spring finally remembered how to arrive, it did not burst. It seeped. The snow that had held to the gutters like stubborn beggars let go one by one. The bread lines shortened not because there was less hunger, but because grain had learned how to travel through safe roads in winter, and now learned how to thrive on the road's edges. The city smelled a little less of death, and a little more of stew. Tommen sent kittens drawn on his letters from the Septi. Loras began to laugh again on afternoons and sleep on nights and kill no one in the morning. Olenna judged and found the young men who asked for Margaery's hand for power wanting in humor and grammar. Margaery declined them all and flirted with none. The rumors of Aegon consolidated into facts with blue banners on red walls. The tales of the Dragon Queen remained tales, but the stories grew more consistent. Margaery learned the shape of a woman she had not met by the ideas men and women used to either scorn or adore her. She prepared for both. One morning the High Sparrow came without a retinue and stood in her garden and looked at a small rosemary plant as if something had just occurred to him that had not occurred to him in decades. "You were right," he said. He did not bow. He did not apologize. "Bread before truth. My truth grew fangs while it waited." "Fangs are inconvenient when hungry mouths are near," Margaery said, trimming the rosemary plant with a knife that could also cut a throat. "I do not like that I serve a queen," he said as if to himself. "I do not like that I need a priest," she said. They stood together with the small sun making a low angle on their faces. "But we will manage." He looked at the rosemary as a man looks at a child he did not father and cannot stop caring for. "For now," he said. "Until fire. Until bread," she said. When at last fire came, dragon fire, rumor said, thick and dark as if the air had been holding its breath for years, and suddenly exhaled. It did not choose King's Landing as first mouthful. It burned ships in distant harbors. It lit the sky of cities that could be pronounced only by men who had never seen snow. Margaery watched the horizon as if she could pull a dragon out with her hand and set it down on the quay with a collar and a bowl. She did not want that. She wanted parley. She wanted chairs. A ship came with a banner of three-headed red and no dragon upon it, only cloth. It carried envoys who did not bow deeply, but bowed. They said, with courtesy wrapped around a man, that Daenerys Stormborn would have a throne when she chose to take it, that she had freed men across the sea and meant to free more, that she was not a queen who collected titles like rings, but wore one ring that was her birth. Margaery answered with wine, water, and a set of figures that showed how many men had eaten bread in King's Landing that week, and how many more would eat next week if ships from the south continued to arrive. She said that if a queen of dragons wanted to inherit a city that did not glove her hand with famine, she would be wise to bless the bread before she raised the banner. The envoys found this crass and then, privately, admitted that it was more convincing than the usual. They drank. They smiled when they did not mean to. They told her that their queen had known hunger as a child and would not despise it. Then we will speak as women who understand what it is to make a meal out of 2 onions and pride, Margaery said. They smiled again despite themselves. A letter finally arrived from Aegon that invited her to join him in alliance against the Lannisters, and she answered with a letter that invited him to the Dragon Pit to see what a city's breath looked like when it was not on fire. He came with griffins who eyed the Red Keep's walls as if green were a trick color. He was young, and he was a king in his own mouth, and he was not unlikable. He listened to her in the hall where the bones rode shadows over them both, and when he said the word conquest, it did not offend her. It only sounded old-fashioned. She told him that the city he wanted to sit was a child, and the children of this city had learned to plant in winter. He looked at her as if she were not yet the sort of queen the songs had taught him to desire, and then looked again as if he might learn a new song. If there was to be war again, it would not be because of the bread. That was her work, the quietest kind. If there was to be war again, it would be because men wanted to lift swords on a bright field in order to make a picture they could carry in their own heads. She could not stop men from painting. She could ensure that the market sold other pictures too. A woman placing a loaf into a child's hands. A young man in brown reading a book to a line of listeners who had never learned to read. A lord with bronze on his chest keeping a promise down to the last seat. The day Margaery finally sat the Iron Throne, not as symbol, not as placeholder, but as seat, came not with banners, but with paper. They had finished revising the city statutes. They had written out new schedules of taxes that did not bleed the poor dry, simply because they could not hide their coin behind information. They had settled for the time the question of whether a queen could sign standards with her own name. They had created a chair. It felt like an accident when she sat, as if she had backed into it, but when she rested her hands on the arms and felt old iron under new silk, it did not bite. The hall tested itself by making noise and then stopping. The Iron Throne had been sat upon by monsters and by boys. Today, it had a gardener. That was what the small folk said later, when they told the story of the day. She listened to a mason ask for stone and a woman ask for a license to sell cabbage, and a man ask for mercy for a brother who had stolen a chicken in haste. She said yes, yes, and we will see. She felt the tide of the room determine its own time of ebb and did not push it. When the hall emptied, she stayed a moment longer, as if to make sure the chair did not grow teeth again. Olenna, passing by like a skeptical wind, said, "You look like a girl who has finally found a stool that fits her." "I look like a woman trying to keep a dragon from landing on her roof," Margaery said. "Let the dragon land," Olenna said. "Offer her honey and a warm rock. If she eats your rock, she was not a dragon worth knowing." Margaery laughed, and it sounded like water falling where it was supposed to instead of out of a pipe that would flood someone's cellar. She rose. The chair held a slight warmth when she left it. She liked that. She would not keep it if another claim came wrapped in sense and strength and not in fire or petulance. She would keep it while the city needed a woman to think of cats and boys and ovens, and why a certain street still stank when it rained. At dusk, she went once more to her balcony and watched the lights come up. The city looked less like a wound than it had when she first had this view. Far off, beyond walls, beyond the reach of her eyes, the world turned with its old mischief. Swords crossed in the sea through temper tantrums, and men forgot their vows, and then remembered them at the worst time. In the chamber, a kettle murmured. On the hearth, her grandmother slept in a chair and called someone a fool between breaths. In the corridor, Loras hummed a reach song out of tune and did not mind he had lost the melody. In a small room in the sept, a boy read by candlelight to a cat that could not hear and did not care. Margaery stood between bread and truth and thought that the balance held. She had outplayed a man who thought everyone else on the board existed to admire his many hands. She had outlasted a woman who thought a crown was a mirror. She had learned which men would carry a sack of flour 3 streets for a woman whose back hurt and given those men badges that meant something. She had written Sansa's name in a ledger marked North and hoped the ink would not run. She had paid the watch. The bells began again, softer now, as if the metal had found a way to sing without accusation. Margaery leaned against the balustrade and breathed in the smell of bread cooling somewhere below. She did not think of Littlefinger's smile. She did not think of how his fingers had moved in rooms like this. She thought of the vines she had set to climbing the city's walls and how their leaves would make a shade that was not for hiding but for resting. Tomorrow, there would be hard letters from the Iron Bank and from Aegon, and from men who wished to become dragons without learning how to fly. Tomorrow, there would be decisions that would break someone's bone. Tomorrow, she would still be a queen. Tonight, she was a woman with sore feet, and a throat that wanted wine, and a city that sounded like a child breathing evenly at last. She listened until she heard it, smiled, and went to pour herself a cup.